Sports fans love superstars for obvious reasons, and when it comes to determining a favorite, usually fans will pick a standout on their favorite team or a player they follow through the college ranks. But even in this most elite classification of athlete, there is a clear divide between a simple superstar like an Aaron Donald or a Patrick Peterson, guys who are undeniably dominant at their respective positions, and the superstar that transcends their phenomenal play and turns into something bigger. And that, my friends, is the only accurate way to describe Deion Primetime Sanders. The only man to play in both the World Series and the Super Bowl. Sanders always had a larger-than-life persona. He was arrogant, he was outspoken, and he was different. He was prime time. Because he didn't just hop on camera and pontificate endlessly only to go out on the field come Sunday and stink it up. He was truly elite at everything he did. When you look back at Deion Sanders' career as a professional athlete and the persona he carried in the public eye, it's tough to tell exactly where Deion ended and prime time began. Most people will tell you that as time went on, the two entities blended into one. So who was Deion Sanders and when exactly did he become prime time? Or perhaps most interestingly, why? Deion's story starts in Fort Myers, Florida, where he and eventually his sister, who was 9 years younger, were born and raised by their mother, Connie Knight. Knight worked tirelessly to provide her children with the best life she could, working early morning shifts at Lee Memorial Hospital for over 20 years. As a single-income family, they were barely getting by, so she couldn't afford luxuries like a babysitter. Instead, each morning she'd make breakfast, lay out the clothes, attach the front door key to Deion's shirt pocket, and then call him from work at 7 a.m. to wake him for school. Connie was determined to keep Deion on the right path, as the area he grew up in was riddled with drug use and crime. And both Deion's father and stepfather were plagued by battles with addiction, so this was no easy task. Even though Deion was young, he recognized the blood, sweat, and tears that his mother put into raising him and his sister. And as he continued to show more and more promise as an athlete, he made a promise to both his mother and himself. A promise he detailed in a letter to his younger self. He wrote for the Players Tribune saying, "Mama, one day I'm gonna be rich. I'm gonna make a lot of money so you don't ever have to work another day in your life." The first step in making good on his promise to his mother came pretty easy to Deion. In high school, he was all-state in football, baseball, and basketball, proving to be a truly special kind of athlete. Although it wouldn't reach its final form for a few years, it was actually during a high school basketball game that prime time was first conceived, when a teammate gave Sanders the nickname after Deion scored 30 points in an important game. Anyway, Deion caught the eye of numerous scouts, both in baseball and football. He ended up receiving a handful of D1 scholarship offers to play football and was drafted in the 6th round of the MLB draft by the Kansas City Royals. After weighing his options, it soon became decision time. And as tempting as the $40,000 signing bonus to play baseball was, strangely, after consulting Royals manager Dick Hauser, Sanders decided to go play football at Florida State. Hauser reportedly told him that if he were in the same position as Deion was, he'd give football a shot and let it play out, continuing to say, "If you're good enough for us to draft you now, you'll be good enough for us to draft you in another couple of years." A statement that Deion would later prove true, as he hit .331 in a season playing college ball at Florida State before being drafted by the New York Yankees. Anyways, off to Tallahassee Deion went, and clearly what proved to be the correct decision. And from the second he showed up on campus, he began cultivating the prime time persona. For starters, he showed up to Florida State on day one in a brand new '85 Firebird with prime time on the front plate and a Jerry curl on his head. The upperclassmen were befuddled. In their eyes, Florida State was a blue-collar program. There was no room for such displays, so they ordered Sanders and all the other freshmen with a popular hairstyle to get rid of them. But Deion was not just any freshman, and much to the chagrin of his upperclassmen, he acted as such and refused to cut his hair. That is just who Deion was, though.
You think what you want about me. I'm not changing. I like me.
He was always going to be himself, no matter what anyone told him. And while there were some rough patches in getting along with his teammates early on, it was much easier to stomach as they got to know him better, and as he emerged almost immediately as a game changer for the Seminoles on the field. During his time at Florida State, Sanders lettered in 3 sports, continuing football and baseball and also running for the school's track and field team. And just like pretty much everything else Deion Sanders has done in his life, he excelled in all 3. But football proved to be his best sport, and for 4 years, Deion Sanders shut down opposing receivers in the Seminole secondary, accumulating 186 tackles and intercepting 14 passes, plus 3 more in bowl games over that time. The end result? Sanders was a 2-time consensus All-American cornerback in 1987 and 88, and a 3rd-team All-American in 1986. And finally, in his senior season, he won the Thorpe Award, which is given to the nation's best defensive back. All the while, Prime Time continued furthering his brand as the loudest defensive back in the country. It wasn't just senseless trash talk, though. Everything Prime did was very calculated. Even though he showed up in Tallahassee as Prime Time, it wasn't until during a conversation with his roommate that he first verbalized his master plan. And it really started to take on a life of its own. The two were said to be sitting there, talking about what the future could hold for Sanders at the professional level, when Deion started spouting out about how it's garbage what NFL teams pay defensive backs. In a later interview, Deion reflected on the conversation, explaining, "I said, I'm not going to be just a defensive back, I'm going to be more, and this is how I'm going to do it. I manipulated the press, I created something larger than a football player." And so it began. Deion started to further develop the character of Prime Time. In his dormitory, he took a notebook and started scribbling down lines. "I'm the best thing since peanut butter and jelly. Water covers 2/3 of the earth, I cover the rest. You throw it my way, next thing you'll hear is the band playing." He'd fill the book with all sorts of one-liners, which he would later become famous for, and rehearse them in the bathroom mirror until he felt he had really become one with them. Many athletes use visualization and self-talk to improve their performance on the field, but this was far from self-talk. Deion took his words and shouted them loudly and proudly at anyone and everyone, determined to make himself bigger than the position and more than an athlete. He knew he was talented enough to use sports as a vehicle to wealth, but it was more than just making enough money to be wealthy. He had a promise to keep. So Deion pushed himself to transcend athlete, and he became an entertainer, a bona fide celebrity even. He drew attention to himself in every way possible. He sported flashy clothes like tailored leather, donned tons of gold jewelry, and boasted like few others had ever done at the college ranks. And that is how he ended up on top of the bench during a 1988 blowout win against the University of South Carolina, imploring the Gamecock fans to demand their money back through one of the cheerleaders' megaphones. Or the time before a huge matchup with in-state rival Florida, who was number 2 in the country at the time, when Deion hired a limousine to take him to the stadium and pulled up wearing a full tuxedo. The key ingredient in all of this was the success on the field, like the blowout against USC and the 52-17 win against number 2 Florida. Boastful athletes are entertaining, but the act gets old real quick if they don't back it up. And Prime Time always backed it up. Sanders parlayed his successes at Florida State into a bevy of opportunities at the next level. He was again drafted to play baseball, this time by the New York Yankees, Major League Baseball's premier franchise. And in football, it was more of the same. After running a lightning-fast 4.27-second 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine, he was taken with the 5th overall pick in the 1989 NFL Draft by the Atlanta Falcons. As was par for the course for Deion, he always wanted to earn as much as he believed he was worth, which, spoiler alert, was a lot. Unheard of numbers for defensive backs at the time. And even though the Falcons knew what they were getting into by drafting Deion, they still seemed shocked when Sanders scoffed at their contract offer. Sanders was looking for a 6-year, $10.75 million contract with the Falcons, who were reportedly offering something closer to a 5-year deal valued at between $3.75 million and $4.1 million. In the meantime, Prime Time kept busy playing baseball for the Yankees. He played about 100 games for their minor league affiliate before being called up in June after an injury in the Yankees' outfield. Finally, after a contentious negotiation, he inked a $4.4 million deal with the Falcons, as well as his own licensing agreement with NFL properties and signing a bonus larger than Tony Mandarich got. True to form, he made his professional football debut just 24 hours after hitting a home run for the Yankees in a game against the Seattle Mariners, and 5 minutes into the game, he returned a punt for a 68-yard touchdown. Just Prime Time doing Prime Time things, if you ask me. Talking the talk, making a huge spectacle of everything, and then trotting out there doing something that no one has ever seen before. And he would continue doing that for the rest of his career in both sports. The accomplishments he had were truly cartoonish, something out of a video game. He won 2 Super Bowls, one with the 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys, in back-to-back seasons. He narrowly missed winning a World Series with the Braves, and what's even crazier is if the Braves had pulled out that victory, Sanders would have likely earned MVP honors as he was hitting over .500 during the series. While he continued to toggle back and forth between the two sports, which he famously called his wife referring to football and his girlfriend referring to baseball, he just happened to run up 8 seasons as a Pro Bowler and 6 first-team All-Pro selections. And when he retired, he was the NFL's all-time leader in non-offensive touchdowns. To put it simply, Deion "Primetime" Sanders was a different breed. He could do things that few other athletes have ever done, and he made it look easy. Every goal that Sanders set for himself, he almost always blew past, including financially. The same guy who was tempted mightily by a potential life-changing signing bonus of $41,000 is now worth over $40 million. So for all of the Jekyll and Hyde-esque struggles that Sanders had in managing his two personas, my guess is he's pretty content with his story. For all of his shortcomings, the prime-time character he created worked, making him a boatload more money and changing the cornerback position forever. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do that by clicking the subscribe button down below. If you like the video, then like the video. We'd really appreciate it. And last but not least, don't forget to tune in to TPS every single day for more cool videos. We'll see you next time.